Hi everyone, and welcome back to another tutorial where I'm going to show you how to make a perfectly simple dress into something really stunning. And we're using my Millie pattern this time, and we're going to give it a little bit of a boho style and a wrap over in the back. Now please ignore this, I have cut this together so it shouldn't stop you doing this, but the left line is what you really want. That is how it should look. So see, I make mistakes too. Anyway, from the inside everything is beautifully lined. You're gonna have an overlocking line there where I've tacked it in, but apart from that it'll be just like this one. First of all, you need the Millie pattern or any similar pattern that you've already got, and the back of the Millie is flat, it doesn't have a yoke. So take your front yoke, place it on top of the back, and then you mark a line where that front yoke is so that you know that's where I'm going to have my back yoke. And then we're going to take the back and sellotape it to some paper, fold the paper over and draw around the edge, because what we're going to do is create an overlap which runs from one side to the other. I think that's so cute and so easy to get in as well. So now I can connect the line at the neck all the way down, and that is art. You can do it as you like. I just did a very smooth one here, and then if you imagine another one coming from the other side, look, this is what it would look like. And you can get really inventive because you can make these overlaps anything you like. For example, if you did it a lot steeper, such as this, then you get a really nice sort of V-neck at the back. I think that's absolutely gorgeous. So do let your imagination run wild and do what you like. So for the lower part, because it's not meant to be a dress, we need to cut some off. And I decided I wanted it to be just like between waist and hips. So I went up 17 centimeters, that's 7 inches, and I cut it off there. But the back also didn't have any room for gathering, so I need to add that in, and I add in the same as I had on the front piece, which was 9 centimeters or 3.5 inches. So you draw that out, and then you also want to mark the on the fold and the back on it, because it's so easy to get confused. Back and front is literally the same, but still. Then you also need to add in a seam allowance, because you've cut the pattern apart, so obviously you need to add that in order for it to not be too small. And once we've done that, we're almost done. We just need to then cut the front the same so that it's the same length. And if you're making the yoke the same as the front, then you don't really need to have another pattern piece. The front yoke is really cut out in the Millie dress because I needed to fit heads through, but you don't have to do that with a wrap over. So you can make the neckline anything you like. You can make it a little bit higher, you can make it, I don't know, you tell me. Anyway, once this is done, we are ready to cut everything out. So what we're going to cut is the front yoke in lining and in shell fabric once on the fold, and the back yoke we're cutting 4 times, 2 times in lining and 2 times in upper fabric. And then the lower front and back is going to be cut on the fold, but you only need one of those each. So it's quite simple. Next we're going to cut the ruffles, and this ruffle is 6.5 inches wide, and I'm making it 2.5 times as wide as the lowest part of that upper part, which I've already got in the check. You can see it there. So if you measure that and you times it by 2.5, you get the length you need. If you do less ruffles, you will need less, but I think it's quite nice if it's really ruffly. And then the second one that goes right over the top, we're going to cut that 4 inches, and that gives me that really cute double ruffle. When you're working with checks, you need to make sure that when you sew them together, they actually match up, so that when you open out your seam and you're going to work with it, nobody's going to be any of the wiser if you use some rests and you had to put them together the way I had. Beautiful, can't really see. Now we're going to do that old trick where we do the shoulders first. So right side's facing down. We're going to put together the front and the back, and then in the lining we do exactly the same. The seam allowance on my pattern is 1 centimeter. On your pattern, if it's simplicity, it might be 1.5. Iron your seam flat first and then apart. We've learned that now, haven't we? So, and we do the same on the lining, and then with the lining facing down we're going to sew it together, but we're going to use some stay tape around the neckline so it doesn't stretch. And because people always have problems with putting this on, I'm going to show you this real slow so that you can't get confused at all about this. So pin it in strategic places, and then I'm going to not pin in my stay tape, but I'm doing it as I go along. And the important thing is where you have the bias, that means the grain is not straight, you push in your fabric like I do. I do this literally apart from where it's straight all the way around the neckline, so I'm holding in my neckline as well as, you know, not just making it the same as the pattern, but actually holding it in a bit. So if this was, for example, a dress for yourself and you're doing a really big plunging neckline and you bend forward, you don't want, you know, anything to fall out or people to see stuff and things. So this is the way that you do that. You hold it in slightly so it literally curves in on itself, and that's the trick. So push the fabric in where the bias is, but not where it's straight, because then you end up having packers. So straight it will be at the bottom of the neckline, and then everywhere else it's kind of slightly on the bias. So I keep pushing this in. Here it's going to stretch again, so make sure you hold it in a bit. Push the fabric in. Then it's a bit of straight again. And as we come round, we're going to hold it in again. So push. Takes a bit of practice this, but you will get the hang of it. And then it's really nice to have all these gorgeous necklines. Now we're going to cut this back and snip it. In my case, actually, I was in such a hurry, I didn't even cut it back. I just cut back my seam on the shoulder and then snipped it. Now we're understitching. That means that we're stitching our lining to the seam allowance, and that way the neckline sits really beautifully and it can't roll out. But there's none of this like Wally, you know, I'm just going to sit here and like be really light with my fabric. Really hold it down, pull it apart, so that it's not going to have any creases in there. I see that all the time. And also one thing you're not seeing here, but I actually had my seam allowance fold the other way, so I had to unpick it and start again. So it's a really good thing to keep checking, you know, lift it up and check that the seam allowance hasn't folded the other way. And then it's so easy and it's so beautiful. You just have to fold it over and you can press it, and that neckline will almost like round in on itself and sit real well. And the other thing I wanted to say to you guys is to not be scared to mess a little bit with your patterns. As long as you don't change like the center back, the center front, and you're just changing lines, it's fantastic. You can be your own little pattern designer if you like for this stuff. No problem, right? Now we're going to do the sleeve. So we're not elasticating it just in one area, but elasticating the whole lot. So right sides together, we're going to sew along that lower part first, and you can do that foot width or centimeter, it doesn't really matter. I've also got a workshop video out for that just recently, so you could watch that, but this is quite detailed as well because I wanted you to see this for this dress and not have to swap back and forth for, you know, to other videos. Now we're going to do understitching again, and what do? Yes, we force it apart really hard. Oh, somebody's saying hello next door again there. She is ringing the door. Right, now we've got our little sleeve, and I press first the seam flat and then I press it over, and it gives it like a really pristine and super duper edge. Now we're going to cut this little bit away. That is because you have done the understitching, and then of course you have got that tiny little bit where it pushes up. It will do because, you know, of the way it sits. Now we're going to close the underarm seam, and one thing I always see is people like not sewing in that little like peak. They're kind of sew straight down, and that's just wrong. So you need to sew in the peak, and then you iron it apart. And just to make sure that you have no tension there, we're going to take our snip scissors and we'll snip either side. And then we'll press it, and we can pin the lining of the sleeve to the shell of the sleeve, and then we're going to put the gather stitches all the way around the sleeve head. And we're also going to put a stitch down here, starting just before you get to the seam, and then we're ending just before as well, and you'll see in a minute why that is. So the first line of your gather stitches with the largest stitch available, or the longest stitch, sorry, you're going to sew close to the edge all the way around the sleeve head. It doesn't really matter how far down you go, to be honest. You know, it's better to be a bit further down than too little. Pull it out, long thread left hanging, and then the next one goes foot width next to that. And that way, when we come to stitching the sleeve in, if we are sewing between those two lines, it's a perfect centimeter. So now start, see, right in front of the seam, and go all the way around, and then end, leaving a little gap of maybe 2 centimeters tops, so that you can just get it in your safety pin and pull the elastic through. And I'm just stitching this all the way around. And stop. Don't stop directly on the seam, because it's quite hard to get through. You get your safety pin caught in the seam, which is no fun. So check that the elastic is the right width, and then put it on your safety pin, and now push it through, but start with where you go past the seam first, because here you can actually see it. That's okay. If you came from the other side at the end of it, sometimes you get stuck and you just really can't get through, and I've been sitting there myself, you know, like trying to get it through and past a seam. So start on that side so that you come out on the other side where it's easy like that and you don't have a problem. You don't want to do that on the other side. So pull it out. Take out your seam, take out your safety pin, and then we're going to attach those two together, and we're just going to stitch across it so they just overlap like that. Then let the elastic slip back into this casing we've done now, and after that all we have to do is close it. And to be honest, nobody's going to see the start and beginning of your stitching because it's gathered anyway. Beautiful little sleeve. And by the way, the sleeve will also fit into the Vivian dress. So if you've got that and you're thinking, I want short sleeves, just put that one in. That'll fit. Make sure that they're both the same. And then you need to put gather threads as well into the front and the back. And then we're going to put that onto your yoke. Now I would actually suggest that you do the lining and the upper fabric in one go. I made a few mistakes on here, and I very, very cunningly cut together this video so that you don't see it too much. But it would be easier to do it like that. You can of course do it first, just stitching it to the upper layer, and then you can turn in the lower layer, the lining, and hand stitch it. You can also do that if you haven't got an overlocker, but I would suggest that you do this as one layer, the upper and the lining, stitch it to that lower layer of check fabric, and that way it's much easier. And then you just overlock that. That's how they do it in industry. No reason to make it hard for yourself unless you really don't like overlocked edges. And this is how mine looked, but we can see it was all wrong. So your line will look something like this, much nicer, I think. And we're going to work this now as one. Next we're going to make that little extra layer on the bottom, and we're going to use the ruffle foot again. First of all, you can turn it in if you don't have an overlocker and stitch it through, or just overlock it and stitch it up, which is what I did. And we do the same on that lower check layer as well. So here I've put them together, and make sure that you also stitch them together at the top, because the ruffler foot will not do 2 layers in one without one slipping out. Trust me on that. I've done it myself when I was a bit lazy and tried to do without. So now the lower layer of your dress or top is going to go in so that the right hand side faces up, and then my ruffle layer is going to face downwards on it, and now the wrong side is up, and I'm just going to make sure that both the edges are on top of each other as I go through. Always go a little bit further to the side. I would think that 1.5 centimeters actually instead of the 1 is much better, because it does slip a little and you don't want it to slip out. So that's what I tend to do, is slightly more over to the right while I ruffle. And you do that on the front and you do that on the back. And the side seams are still open, and please ignore that layer you can see there now, that was just so wrong. Overlock your layer and then you can put together the side seams. And again, we can then overlock them afterwards. I've overlocked it, and now I can put my sleeves in. And if you're wondering how I got from one layer to the other layer like that, is because I unpicked it and completely matched the layers up so it looked as it does on that little picture there. That was some hard work. Now we're going to put the sleeve in, and right sides on top of each other, obviously underarm seam first, then the sleeve head, then you pull your gather threads so that you have nice amount of gather on either side. And the perfect amount I always find for kiddie clothes is 4 centimeters. So get your tape measure and measure how many gathers you have. Make sure they are at that 4 centimeter mark. That looks absolutely stupendous. And then you do the same on the other side, and we're done. So remove all those vertical pins and put them in horizontally, and then you can check your sleeve. Make sure that you have the same amount of gathers to the front as you have to the back, and then you sew your sleeve in. Sewing a sleeve in with a gather top is so much easier than when you have to ease in, because it's basically flat underneath the arm and then you've got the gathers, and you can arrange them with a pin a little bit, make sure that they look like really good, and go all the way around. So much easier. So if you are a beginner, then opt for a sleeve like that. And if you, for example, are making my Vivian dress, the little version, with the kiddo version, you can just use this sleeve. If you've got the Millie dress as well, just take the Millie sleeve and come all the way around. And that's basically it. We have put together a dress which looks entirely different to the one we've got, but there is no need, I think, to make another pattern for this if you can do it at home so easily and actually learn how to mash your patterns all together. Then we'll overlock it, and that's it. So we've come from a flat back and we turned it into a super cute overlap, and the right hand side shows you what it should look like thanks to Photoshop. This is the Millie dress. You can also get that on Etsy.com if you really want to do this one, and also I have a bundle deal on there for 4 beginners dresses for you if that's what you want. I hope you are back next week. We're going to do something with the Georgina pattern this time. And also thank you very much to Magdalena, who is modeling all of this for me. She's an absolute superstar. See you then. Bye for now.